guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. As you've probably noticed, I didn't say Mystery Monday. This video actually is not going to be a Mystery Monday video. It's just going to be a true crime case. I hope that you still enjoy it nonetheless, and with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. Catherine, or Kathy Hobbs, was said to have had what I don't want to call a bad childhood, but it was a little bit difficult from her own personal perspective. Kathy was very, very close to both of her parents growing up, but she was exceptionally close to her father. So when her parents decided when she was just 8 years old to get a divorce and that it would be best for the family if Kathy remained living with her mother, this really took a toll on Kathy and just shook up her life so much. Like more than your average child of divorced parents. It just really messed her up. Now, I do believe that Kathy and her father stayed in contact and they did have some kind of relationship, but of course she wasn't seeing him as often as she would have been seeing him if he had remained living with her. But that wouldn't be the only thing that happened to Kathy in her childhood that would scar her a lot. When Kathy was in 8th grade, so meaning she was about 12 to 13 years old, her best friend passed away due to what I believe was a heart condition. Now, it didn't say this anywhere online, but personally I believe that this was probably the incident that set the fear of death in Kathy. She was absolutely terrified that she was going to pass away, and she was very certain that she was going to do so at a young age. And she would tell this to absolutely anybody who would listen to her, insisting that she didn't think that she was going to live past the age of 16, which is a very important part of this case that you're going to want to remember. The stress and worry that Kathy had about passing away at a young age was so severe that both of her parents, although divorced, decided to pack up their lives and move to Las Vegas, hoping that a change of scenery would help Kathy get past this, because her parents just thought that this fear was something that she really needed to overcome, and at the time it seemed very irrational. And moving to Vegas seemed to have had the effect on Kathy that her parents had hoped for. She seemed like she was getting more back to normal life. She didn't seem like she was obsessing so hard about the fear of death. She made some new friends. She still wasn't living the normal average teenager life. She didn't go out all the time. She basically just went to school and came home, but she was socializing more, which was huge because when she was not living in Vegas before her change of scenery, she was so scared that something bad was going to happen to her that she rarely ever left the house. She had really isolated herself, didn't talk to anybody, didn't really have any friends. She just kind of kept herself locked up in her room because she didn't want to go out for the fear of something happening that would lead to her death. So again, moving to Vegas really helped with that. She started to make friends, and although she wasn't living a completely normal life, it was a step in the right direction. But this fear returned when Kathy's 16th birthday began to approach. She again started getting really scared and obsessing over the fact that she thought she wasn't going to make it to her 16th birthday, and she returned to living that really solitary type of lifestyle where at this point she wouldn't leave her bedroom for several days at a time. But when Kathy's 16th birthday arrived and she woke up that morning and she realized that it was her 16th birthday and that she had lived to be 16, she was so excited and relieved and happy. She ran around telling all of her family members and her loved ones how happy she was and how much she loved them and how relieved she was to have been 16 years old. Her mother, Vivian, actually specifically remembers Kathy saying to her, "I made it, Mom. I'm 16. I did it. I'm alive." And after her 16th birthday, Kathy went on to try and live a normal life, making up for all of the lost time that she had. She again started socializing with her friends, but now it wasn't just at school. She would go out at night. She would hang out with them at the pool located in her apartment complex. She just was always out with her friends. She was always socializing with her family. She was the happiest that anybody had seen her in years. And at this time, Kathy started to take a real big interest in beauty and beauty products, and she even went on to enroll in a beauty school, which just made her parents and her loved ones so happy because she was finally living her life without fear, and that was just an amazing thing for everybody to see. On July 23rd, 1987, 16-year-old Kathy was sitting in her bed reading a book. And around 11 p.m., that is when she got up, she put her book away, and she walked out into the hallway and told her mom, Vivian, that she was going to go to the local supermarket and try and buy a book. I believe this supermarket was located 2 blocks from her home, and so Vivian was kind of like, okay, you know, go. This was something that Kathy did a lot because the supermarket wasn't very far, so she would go and walk there. And Vivian was like, okay, go, you know, be back, whatever. But Kathy then proceeded to tell her that while she was going to the supermarket, she was going to go and stop by the apartment's pool just to see if her friends were there. They hung out there quite often, and so she thought that she could go and hang out with them for a bit after buying this book, and she wasn't sure if she would be home before Vivian went to bed, so she kind of just said goodnight to her mother and left at that. Something I just want to mention here is walking to the supermarket, again, like I already said, was something that Kathy did quite often, but usually when she walked to the supermarket, she would go downstairs, she would meet her friends at the pool, kind of tell them she was walking to the supermarket. One of them would agree to go along with her, so it was always Kathy and somebody else walking to the supermarket, and then they would walk back and hang out with the rest of the group of friends at the pool. Because Kathy did this so often and she was always accompanied by somebody else, this is something that just didn't really worry Vivian too much. She didn't think that Kathy would be walking to the supermarket by herself at almost midnight. It seemed like she would be going with at least one other person, and that kind of calmed Vivian's mind. But something else that we just have to remember throughout this case is this was a different time. I feel like way back when parents weren't as strict, it was normal to let your child go out and do things, whereas nowadays it seems like the world is a little bit more scary, or maybe we're just more aware of the scary things that go on in the world. So it might seem a little bit strange to you to think that this mother will let her 16-year-old daughter go out by herself at almost midnight, but really you have to think about the time and the circumstances, and you can't really judge anybody else's parenting because you don't know what was going through their head. They obviously weren't expecting for something bad to happen. After Kathy had left the home, Vivian decided to turn in for the night, and she fell asleep pretty quickly. Something that I just want to mention right now that might seem to not tie in with the case, I'm going to talk about at the end of the video, but it happened in this exact timeline, so I do just want to include it here, and I'm going to ask that you kind of keep this in the back of your mind. So at 3 a.m. that night, Vivian remembers waking up from a very strange dream. And she said when she woke up, she had this really painful feeling as if somebody had hit her in the head with something really hard. She said after feeling this pain, it kind of subsided a little bit, and then she felt an overwhelming feeling of peace, and she just felt really calm. And she remembered that at that point thinking, it's over now, everything's okay, it's done now. And because she felt so peaceful, she then just fell right back into a very deep sleep. Now, again, that is something that I just wanted to mention. It does seem strange and doesn't really seem to fit into this part of the case, but it will fit in later on. I just want to go through things as the timeline really happened. The next morning when Vivian woke up, she went into Kathy's room to wake her up, and that is when she found that her daughter's bed was unslept in and Kathy was not there, meaning that Kathy had never made it home the previous night. This set Vivian into a state of panic, and she called the police immediately. Now, something that is almost kind of refreshing to hear in these kinds of cases is that Kathy's case was taken very seriously by police. They didn't give Vivian a hard time. They immediately started to investigate Kathy's case. And this was because there was a huge fear at the time that Kathy had been abducted. So they started to print out posters with her face and just make sure that her face was seen absolutely everywhere in hopes that somebody would come forward with some information, or maybe have seen Kathy somewhere after the night that she was last seen by her mother. There was just really a lot of work going on in this case right off the bat. So obviously, because Kathy had told Vivian that she was going to the supermarket to buy a book, the supermarket employees were all questioned, and the employee who was working that night did confirm that they did in fact see Kathy come in that evening and buy a book. They said that she was alone, and there was a receipt that confirmed that she had made this purchase at 11:17 p.m., just kind of confirming that she was there. The employee said that nothing was out of the ordinary. Again, she was by herself. She purchased this book and then left the supermarket. Something else that was confirmed is that none of Kathy's friends had been at the pool that night, which kind of explains why Kathy had walked to the supermarket alone. This wasn't something that she did very often, but maybe she just really wanted to get that book this time, so she did end up walking alone, and that does explain why she would have gone straight to the supermarket. There would have been no reason for her to stop at the pool, but this also leads to the assumption that Kathy should have been home quite early, because she wouldn't have had time to stop at the pool before going to the supermarket and then hanging out at the pool after going to the supermarket. She would have just walked straight to the market and straight home, which obviously was not the case. So again, visiting this supermarket was something that Kathy did quite often after her 16th birthday. And this supermarket was located at Desert Road Inn and Maryland Parkway, and she would go there quite often. She would buy whatever she needed and then she would walk home. But again, usually she was accompanied by a friend. Now, on this particular night, again, it was confirmed that Kathy went into the supermarket, and it was confirmed that she left the supermarket alone. But whatever she did afterwards or wherever she went afterwards was completely unknown. But what seemed pretty concrete in this case is after Kathy had left the supermarket, something must have happened to her, because there would have been no other reason for her to have not returned home that night. Something that seemed odd to police is that the area in which the supermarket was located in and the strip that Kathy would have been walking to get to and from the supermarket and her apartment was an area that would have been very populated even at that time of night. There was always people driving down this strip, there was always people walking. It was just a really popular area, and despite this, nobody came forward saying they'd seen absolutely anything. And then just 9 days after Kathy's disappearance, a geologist was out in a remote field located in Lake Med, which I believe was about a half an hour outside of Las Vegas. And while he was out there looking for rock crystals, that is when he came across a horrible discovery. He stumbled upon the body of a young woman. This body was confirmed to be that of 16-year-old Kathy Hobbs. Police had found tire prints at the scene that confirmed that a vehicle had pulled into the area near the body, turned around, and then drove out of the area. The coroner was able to determine that Kathy had passed away due to several blows to the head. There were 2 rocks that were found in the area, both having Kathy's blood on them, and they were assumed to be the murder weapon. Kathy had also been sexually assaulted before her death. And then on October 24th, which was exactly 3 months to the day of Kathy's disappearance, the Las Vegas Police Department received an anonymous call. Now, they could tell that the person on the other end of the line was in fact a man, and he claimed that he had witnessed Kathy's abduction. He told police the exact location in which Kathy had been abducted from, and it was the location that the police were already assuming that she had been abducted from. He also gave an accurate description of exactly what Kathy had been wearing on that evening. He said that the reason that he didn't call police right away and why he took so long to call police is because he was out of town for several months, and that is why he didn't make the phone call to them earlier. Police theorized before this phone call that they believed that Kathy had been abducted by 1 or 2 people who somehow forced her into a vehicle, driving her down to the lake and then murdering her on the exact same night that she had been abducted, and this anonymous caller was pretty much just confirming what they had already known. The caller said that he had seen 2 men forcing Kathy into a vehicle and that she was screaming the entire time that this was going on. The caller even got down to the nitty-gritty, telling police that he believed that one of the abductors' names was Robbie, or Rob, Robert, any form of Robert. He said that was what he was aware that this man's name was. The caller didn't leave any of his own personal information. However, he did leave a license plate number with the police, claiming that this was the license plate number of the car that Kathy Hobbs had been forced into. Once the call was done, police ran the license plate number that was given to them by this caller, and it turned out that this license plate number did not exist. Because of this, police kept trying to appeal to this anonymous caller, hoping that he would call back and be able to provide them with more information, but that never happened. The caller never called back. Now, something that just made me think throughout this is why on earth would this caller wait so long to have called police? I know that he had given an excuse, like he had been out of town for several months prior to phoning it in, and that is why he didn't call it in. But any good person seeing somebody in a state of panic looking like something is wrong would have called police immediately and wouldn't have waited 3 months to have called in something where it looks like a young girl could possibly be in danger. Why wait? It just is something that doesn't make sense to me, and throughout reading what this anonymous caller had said, it really struck me and made me think a lot, like, what possible reason would you have waited that long? The anonymous caller never called into police again, but despite that, police were still able to solve Kathy Hobbs' case. Investigators linked serial killer Michael Lockhart to the murder of Kathy Hobbs. Michael Lockhart was a multi-state serial killer who preyed on young women between the years of 1987 to 1988 and was suspected of having anywhere from 4 to 6 victims. In May of 1987, Michael Lockhart had actually stolen a blue Toyota Celia, which was the year in 1986, and he kept this vehicle until November of 1987. Because of this, authorities believed that Michael Lockhart had abducted Kathy Hobbs in that blue Toyota. The reason for this is because there were blue fibers that were found at the scene, and they matched the blue fibers that were inside of the stolen vehicle. Michael Lockhart also had credit card statements that put him in Las Vegas at the time of Kathy Hobbs' murder, and when he was questioned about this, he confessed almost immediately. When Michael Lockhart was caught, he was sentenced to death in 3 different states, these states being Texas, Indiana, and Florida. And on December 9th, 1997, he was executed by the state of Texas. Obviously, all of the cases that I cover like this are just absolutely heartbreaking, but I'm not sure what it is about this specific case, but it really struck a chord with me. And honestly, I was having a little bit of trouble covering this case because I just got so invested in it, because this case, for some reason, just got to me so much more than the other ones. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. My heart sincerely goes out to all of the loved ones of Kathy Hobbs and anybody else who was affected by this case or who was related to the victims of Michael Lockhart. This case is just absolutely devastating, and I can't even imagine what Kathy's loved ones, her mother, her father, her family, anybody who was close to her was going through at the time of this, and even now. I think that the reason that this case got to me and affected me so deeply is because Kathy was so horrified to live her life that she wasn't doing so. She wasn't happy. She wasn't out and living the way that anybody her age should have been. And when she finally felt good enough to go out and started living and being happy and doing what she wanted, somebody came along and decided to take that away from her, and that is just absolutely horrible. On another note, something about this case that really interested me and made me kind of think that maybe Kathy and Vivian had some kind of psychic ability is because Kathy had such a deep feeling that she wasn't going to make it past the age of 16, that she stressed about it every single day for years. And at the time, of course, like I mentioned already, her parents thought that this fear was super irrational. Everybody in her life thought that it was super irrational, but Kathy stood by it, and it was something that she really, really felt deeply in her soul, and it turned out to be true. And the reason that I also decided to mention Vivian in this is because of that strange dream that she had on the night that Kathy had passed away. Not only did she wake up with a sore head, which would kind of be what Kathy was going through at the same time that her mother had woken up, but on top of that, she said that she felt almost like a peace feeling, like it was finally over, and that just really got my mind going, making me think. I mean, some people would chalk up Vivian's strange dream and her strange occurrence that night as a mother's intuition, but to me it just made me think maybe something else was going on here, and they had some sort of, I guess it would be an intuition that maybe other people don't have, where they kind of felt so deeply with themselves that they could see things or figure things out in the future. I know that sounds really crazy and doesn't make much sense, but I do mean that wholeheartedly. After Kathy's death, there were several letters found in her room that were addressed to each one of her family members, and they were all dated to 1 month before her 16th birthday. Now, originally I planned on reading some of these letters that I'd seen online in this video, but after thinking about it and reading it, I just feel like they are a very, very personal thing, and I don't want to take that away from her family members who received these letters and Kathy, who had written them specifically for her family members, not for the public. So I'm not going to do that, but I do just want to mention that she basically said in these letters how much she loved each and every one of her family members, how much she loved her mother and her father and everybody who was in her life, and how she knew that she was going to die, but she didn't want them to be sad after her death. Again, my heart does go out to anybody who was affected by Michael Lockhart and any of his cases. My heart sincerely goes out to the family of Kathy Hobbs and all of her loved ones, as well as anybody else who was affected by this case. This case is one that I just can't wrap my head around. I can't understand how Kathy could have predicted what was going to happen. Maybe not to the exact point and to what degree it would happen in, but she did say that she wasn't going to make it past the age of 16, and she was right, and I just can't wrap my head around that. But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!